A very good day and a warm welcome once again to another session on event management. Today's topic would be dealing with vendors. A bit about myself, Sheetal Gupta, an assistant professor at the AISSMS College of Hotel Management and Catering Technology based in Pune. My email address is mentioned here. For any further queries, kindly do not hesitate to contact me. I shall be glad to revert to you. So let us begin today's session on dealing with vendors. Dealing with vendors, a vendor would basically mean a supplier who aids you and assists you in event management. So let us begin our session. An introduction to the topic. Some of the most important relationships you develop in the course of running your business is the relationship with the third-party vendors and suppliers. As a business person, you need to rely on other experts for their knowledge of materials, care and maintenance of equipment, and much more. You can't be expected to know everything or source everything you need for your business, which is why these relationships are essential to your long-term business success. Choosing wisely. If you have the luxury of choosing between multiple suppliers, take the time to examine each one's pros and cons. Determine which supplier or vendor can give you what you need, when you need, and for the right price. Evaluate everything from their response time to their contract terms to their costs. Relationships in business are more successful if they have the time to grow. So you want to select a supplier that you and your organization will be able to grow with. The easiest way to engender in any relationship is a lack of communication. Take the time to communicate with the supplier and vendor and ask for the same type of outreach in return. This is especially important regarding timelines in business. Understanding their business. While you don't need to necessarily understand every nuance about a supplier's and vendor's business, having a general working knowledge of their policies will help you to understand better their values. It will also give you context to the challenges they face, which is important if you work in a business with shifting priorities and deadlines that require a great amount of flexibility. If you understand why a supplier is saying no, it makes it much easier to plan ahead. Planning for contingencies. There are normal everyday contingencies you should plan for, like late delivery or shipments, weather-ruined pallets. There are also major disruptions to plan for, like natural disasters or critical equipment failure. Most of these contingencies will probably be developed in-house, but you should make a concession for your suppliers and vendors and make sure they have a clear understanding of how you will expect them to behave should the unthinkable happen. Both the client and the supplier and vendor are responsible for the success or the failure of the working relationship. Hence, acceptance and accountability for your place in the process by acknowledging that your decisions, delayed timing, or changes in the project scope directly impact the vendor's ability to do his job well. Investments in supplier management software. This is essentially to preserve your sanity and the sanity of the office staff. Supplier relationship management software or SRM software is especially important as the number of suppliers you work with grows. It can be used to monitor the supplier performance and keep all your supplier and vendor details in one place. Many supplier management software programs also interface with accounting software, making for a seamless invoicing experience. Paying on time. Your vendor does a job and should be compensated for it on time. Consider the last time a customer was late paying you. Even if they had told you the check would be in a few days late, consider the slight annoyance you felt at having to wait and the relief you felt when the check finally arrived. Paying the vendors on time demonstrates that you respect them and the work that they do. Continuously working on strengthening your relationship. Look for opportunities outside the general day-to-day contact. If you have a quarterly meeting or you can invite your suppliers to come and visit your facility, making sure to spend time with them and forge stronger ties. Ask the vendors for their feedback. Encourage them to have open discussions with you about ways that the relationship could work better or more efficiently. Vendor relationships are actual business partnerships and hence a two-way street. Let us now show you and demonstrate a small video on vendorship and supplier management. Kindly pay attention to this small video.
Vendor risk management, 6 basic questions. If your company is like most organizations, you're probably using a growing number of vendors to support your business. These vendors likely perform a wide variety of functions such as operations, providing supplies, processing financial transactions, managing your website, and performing building services. While these arrangements are great, they can also introduce risk to your company. Today, companies need to be concerned about breaches, data exposure, and regulatory non-compliance. How do you get your arms around such a complex issue? If your company uses vendors, then you need to ask yourself 6 basic questions. The first one is, does your company currently perform vendor management? If they do, then you're one step ahead. The next step is to find out what information is being collected. It also makes sense to partner with the internal group that leads this effort. That way you can influence the questions that are being asked and understand what information is being analyzed. If there is no vendor management program in place, then your company may have a high level of active and unmanaged risk. Number 2, who are your key vendors? Not all vendors have the same level of importance. Companies can use some basic techniques to figure out who are the most critical vendors. Here are some basic questions to help make that determination. Does the vendor have access to any sensitive data? Does the vendor store or host sensitive data on their IT systems? Does the vendor have access to data that could result in harm if stolen? If this vendor suffers a data breach, will that require reporting? If the vendor suffers a significant outage, would your company activate its business continuity plan? Number 3, what risks do you want to measure? It's difficult to capture information about vendor risk without first understanding what you want to assess. Once you know that, you'll be able to ask the right questions for your vendor risk assessments. Here are some categories to be considered in your vendor assessment: cybersecurity, legal, regulatory, privacy, information technology, business continuity. Number 4, how do I start to manage vendor risks? If nobody owns vendor management in your organization, you will need to find the answers to some more questions. For example, where will the responsibility fall? Does your team have the required expertise? Does your team have the capacity to manage vendor risk appropriately? If you're not sure about the answers to these questions, then you should explore augmenting your capabilities through knowledgeable consultants or a managed service provider that specializes in this area. Number 5, what tools should I use to make this easier? Spreadsheets and documents can be useful, but tracking vendor risk information might require a more sophisticated approach. Selecting the right tool will provide you with better data management and can also help to automate the process with vendors. Another important factor to consider is how to exchange documentation securely with a vendor. Number 6, what do I do with all this information? Remember, the purpose of vendor risk management is not to check a box and say we did it. You want a desired outcome, such as eliminating a vulnerability or mitigating a known risk. As you become better at understanding risk, it can be used to make informed decisions about whether to work with specific vendors. When you understand your vendor relationships better, they become partners in risk management. Getting a handle on your company's vendor risks can be a challenge, but it doesn't have to be an insurmountable one. By thinking about the items discussed today, you can tackle this complex issue and reduce risk that your company is exposed to by vendors. For more information, or if you need assistance with your vendor risk management program, please contact us at info@quintillionconsulting.com.
Well, I hope that little video on vendor and dealing with vendors threw some insight on how we select our suppliers and how we maintain our relationships with our vendors who help us in our day-to-day business. A mention here about the reference books taken to make my presentation: The Vendor Management Office by Stephen Guth. The YouTube courtesy video is by Quintillion Consulting, and the sources of images is from Bing Image Search. There shall be a quiz link after this video. Kindly do try to attempt the quiz to get you a better understanding of the topic. I end my presentation now by giving a vote of thanks for your kind attention, and I do hope I was able to enlighten you on dealing with vendors. Thank you.